He said, no, I was. Thanks. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the interest of time, we're going to begin our session. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Catherine Nakalembe. I'm an assistant research professor at the University of Maryland, and I lead the East Africa component of the NASA Harvest program that focuses on agriculture monitoring. Our session today for GeoWeek 2019, this is our GeoGLAM food security and early warning session. We have a good set of speakers, and we hope this session will be interactive and will raise some interest in some of the work that's ongoing. Just a summary, end users from local, national, regional, and global scales require reliable, evidence-based, timely, and actionable information to make sound decisions that can improve policies, program formulations, investments, and interventions, leading to enhanced food security, resilience, and agricultural practices. It is widely recognized, and you'll agree with me if you're here for GeoWeek, that Earth observations could play a much stronger and transformational role in informing better policies. With this respect, with respect to farmers and supply chains, better production, better practices, EO can allow us to understand the needs of the communities, including farmers to private companies. And GeoGLAM is working closely with a diverse range of end users, groups to identify and articulate targeted decisions and actions that can be facilitated through advancing the practice and adaptation of Earth observations based information and applications. Our session will have short presentations, and our presenters will then come up front for a panel where we'll have a few questions, and time allowing, we'll take a few questions from the audience. Just quickly, the members on our panel today, we have Mr. Ian Jarvis, who is the Program Director for GeoGLAM, who also is from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. We have Juan, should I say it? We have Juan Gushman, who is from CSIRO. We have Ms. Jane Kioko, who is the head of food crop statistics at the Ministry of Agriculture in Kenya. We also have Ms. Anastasia Wahome, who is from the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development and also works for Severe Eastern Africa. And time allowing, I might be able to present, but also we have a special presentation from a representative from the UN FFFC, David Ullman, who will be talking about the NAP process and how that can be, how we can integrate our two communities. During our panel discussion, we'll hear some of the ways that Earth observations have influenced policy making in Eastern Africa. We'll share some best practices. We'll have questions for our panelists who will highlight some of the best practices in integration of EO. We'll share some ideas. We'll hear from the audience, what ideas we can include in some of the processes and the work that we're doing in the region. And of course, get some advice about how we can scale up some of the best practices, good tools and technology that's existing and can be used by other countries. Again, I'd like to thank you for joining us this morning, and just to move quickly, I'd like to invite Mr. Ian Jarvis to give us an overview of the GeoGLAM program. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I have... There we go. Good. Okay. I need this to be free range so I can see my slides. My job here is to get us kicked off by just giving you an overview of the broader GeoGLAM, and then hopefully focus in on what we're going to talk about here, which is really focused on EO impact in Africa, how we grow that even further. So first of all, the mission statement, if it can be boiled down to really, we're working to bring Earth observations to fight food insecurity and support markets. We're doing this by reinforcing the international community's capacity to produce, disseminate timely and accurate projections of agricultural production at national, regional, and global scales. Our original policy mandate came from the G20 in 2011. It was the first meeting of the agriculture ministers in the G20 in France. And if you remember the 2000s, there were a lot of fluctuations in commodity market prices. And a lot of this was believed to be due to poor or insufficient or missing altogether information. So the G20 ministers thought if we could get Earth observations-based information into the market situation, we could help to stabilize that. So that was our original forming policies. So we moved quickly from 2011, we formed up in 2012, and became operational by 2013, where we started to produce operational crop assessments. And these assessments were focused on the 4 major commodity crops: corn, wheat, maize, and soy. We provide this information on a monthly basis, and we still continue to provide it since 2013 to the Agricultural Market Information System. And this is a group that was formed, they're kind of the statistical stocks and balances side of the ledger in terms of agricultural production. So we provide this into them, and it's published in their monthly market monitors. The real power of this work is that it brings in science-based information from, I think it's up to 44 contributors now, institutions around the world. They bring their science-based information plus their understanding of what's happening on the ground in their regions together, and every month they preside over this information to come up with a consensus. And as you can imagine, when you bring all that diversity of information together, you're going to have things that don't quite agree and so on. But the amazing thing is that every month they're able to produce a product that is consensus-based, and that really makes it authoritative, particularly for the markets. This is what the monthly crop map looks like, and this is from last month. So this focuses on the major producers, the major exporters around the world, not the food insecure parts of the world. But as you can see, it kind of gives you a very simple snapshot of what's happening in the globe. It's kind of a stoplight system where we have green, yellow, red light, as well as exceptional classes. In areas where there are concerns about the conditions, we identify the primary crops that are affected by those adverse conditions. There's a number of other products that come out of this work as well, but this is kind of the high-level snapshot view of everything. Now, based on the success of the markets-based food price volatility-based monitor for AMOS, we fairly quickly moved into adapting that approach to food insecure regions of the world. So we developed a monthly monitor starting in 2016 that has the kind of look and feel of the AMOS monitor, but is really tailored to the needs of those regions. And it has a broader range of crops, and those crops are specific to the food security needs in those regions around the world. The end users are largely groups like the World Food Program, FAO, major food security agencies, but also they are contributors of information in. And again, it's a consensus-based product, so people provide information in, consensus is derived, and it's published. This is from October of this year, the early warning crop monitors for both Africa and Central America. Just to give you a flavor of what it looks like, it's quite similar to the AMOS monitor, as I said. Identifies the key crops that are most impacted. You can see here from Central America that there's actually a failure predicted in smallholder or subsistence farming due to a 2-year drought there. Now, a recent development is bringing both these together, again providing that global snapshot. So every month that we can bring both the early warning crop monitor as well as the AMOS crop monitor together to give a pretty quick read of what's happening around the world in terms of crop production. Now, As we proceeded with these global scale, and these are global scale products that I'm talking about so far, we started to work at the national scale, and we quickly realized this is where we can have the greatest impact on food security in particular, by working with countries, helping them develop their own crop monitors, and by developing their own crop monitoring, as you'll see in the subsequent presentations, that information is developed by the countries, it's trusted, it's then deemed authoritative, and it's very close to the decision makers. And that's the beauty of it. The information that's produced on a monthly basis can then be quickly turned into decisions and policies, which need to be rapid to respond to emerging crises. So these are just two examples, one from Uganda and one from Tanzania. There's many others. I know Kenya launched their crop monitor this year. Mozambique has one, a number of other countries, and they're growing in numbers. But just to give you a flavor of the types of information that's produced, they usually use, again, the common look and feel that was developed in those global monitors, but they're produced by the countries for the countries. If you're at the plenary last year, I talked about some of the impact stories from this information, and this is one of our favorites. It's from Uganda. It was one of the first examples working, actually Catherine working with them to develop their crop monitor in Uganda in the Prime Minister's office. Martin Awar we were hoping he would be here. He couldn't make it in the end. So I get to tell the story, not nearly as good as he would if he was here, but I'll just say that in 2016, GeoGLAM was working with them to develop the monitor, and then quickly, as early as 2017, they found a drought occurring in the Karamoja region of Uganda, and this information provided 3 months early warning of the likely crop failure that they wouldn't have normally had using the previous methods of information collection. These 3 months are critical, especially in something like a drought that's a relatively slow-moving target. It allowed them to mobilize policies and programs, triggering disaster risk financing that really offset some of the agricultural losses. At the end of the day, an estimated $2.6 million were saved in food security, as well as approximately about 150,000 people's lives were helped in a positive way. And the quote from Martin, in the past we always reacted to crop failure, spending billions of shillings. 2017 was the first time we acted proactively because we had clear evidence from satellite data very early in the season. And if you can find a more powerful statement about the potential of Earth observation to have impact, I'd like to see it, but that's a pretty strong statement and something that we take to heart. And as we look at expanding these activities in other parts of the world, we're taking this forward as an example of what types of things that can be achieved. Another example of impact, and this is more at the global level with the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. In 2018, they use our crop monitoring for their special food security alerts. In 2018, they used our information for their special alert on Southern Africa. But within that alert, more importantly, they identified the need for more rapid information. So once a month, they said, wasn't actually adequate in areas of emerging concern or hotspots. So again, we in GeoGLAM took this to heart, and we developed mid-month reporting on these hotspots and put that in place this year. We already have 6 reports that have come out starting early in the year with the Iran-Iraq flood situation, and more recently in October with the Central America drought situation that I talked a bit about earlier. And then in between, Southern Africa drought once again, as well as Cyclone Idai and so on. So this is an example of taking the user needs, evolving our processes to be able to adapt the information to meet those needs. So GeoGLAM's been around for almost 10 years now. And if you think about what's happened on the policy landscape over the last 10 years, it's enormous. We see the Sustainable Development Goals, climate change, Paris Accord, the Sendai disaster framework all occurring over the last 10 years since we initiated GeoGLAM. We as a community are adapting and evolving to try to support these goals as much as possible. as many of us are, of course. And we, as a community, know that a lot of the information we're already producing are fundamental to understanding the state and changes in the agricultural landscape. Therefore, we understand that these information are very useful for any number of these initiatives. So we're working to evolve our activities to produce more statistically sound, valid metrics over multiple time steps. So right now we're focusing mainly within season. We're now looking at developing approaches that allow us to do more season to season, multi-season, and even up to decadal and plus analyses in terms of state and forecast. To do this, we have a 5-step plan. First is developing essential agricultural variables for GEOGLAM. This is to help focus our activities within our community, moving towards those quantitative metrics, but also to communicate it out broader to the statistical agencies and so on that are responsible for many of these policy drivers. So we want to be able to show people where we can fit and where we can contribute. We had a workshop a couple weeks ago on the EAVs. Number 2 is working with the space agencies. We've been doing that since the beginning on data requirements. Now we're evolving to a place where we want to use the essential agricultural variables to help us drive the analysis-ready data needs for agriculture with the space agencies. Number 3 is the infrastructure piece. We're adopting a federated infrastructure, which really what that means is we're not trying to create our own dedicated GEOGLAM infrastructure. What we're trying to do is make use of the many that are out there, both from the private sector and public sector. And there are many. So we're developing a coordination approach so that countries and institutions that want to access cloud processing, cubes, and so on have an easier way to access those services. And it's linked to our knowledge management. So we're getting more serious about our knowledge management system. And if you're at the plenary, you'll see a Knowledge Hub pilot by the Geo Secretariat. I believe it's tomorrow. And this will demonstrate, this actually took some of the intellectual property from our community, from the Send2 Agri program, an ESA-funded project led by University Catholique Louvain. And it's implementing it with a knowledge hub, so it actually has peer-reviewed papers right through the operational tools and implementation of those tools in a pilot area. And we see this as being critical to the future, to making all our algorithms, our programming, our cloud processing capabilities accessible to whoever needs it. And finally, which we're really focusing on today, is better coordinating our capacity development, co-development activities. We met on this a couple weeks ago as well, and we're really firing up a new working group around capacity development. The focus of that is to kind of develop best practices, scaling up activities for greater impact. And we're going to be focused on that as we go through these other presentations and the discussion in the panel. And with that, I'll thank you and look forward to the rest of this session.
Thank you, Ian. For our next presentation, I welcome Dr. Juan Gershman from CSIRO to share about the livestock insurance disaster risk financing program in Kenya.
Okay, thank you. So you may be wondering, what is an Argentinian who is living in Australia doing here talking about livestock insurance in East Africa? So the truth is that this work that I'm presenting is really Francesco's contribution, and unfortunately he couldn't make it to Canberra this week, so I was asked to give this presentation on his behalf. And why me? This is because I am the coordinator of this activity called RAP, Rangeland and Pasture Productivity, which is a component of GEOGLAM. And Francesco, this work from ILRI is one of the main activities within RAP. So what's the button? There we are. All the credit will go to Francesco. All the issues with this presentation are on me. So in East Africa, pastoralism is the principal livelihood for around 40 million people. It represents about 60% of the agriculture GDP, and it also represents exports for about $1 billion. And livestock is essential for household welfare. In the median household, all the productive assets are in the livestock. So livestock is the main asset in many of these families. So they have strategies to cope with drought, but climate change and other economical change are increasing the vulnerability of these communities. So when this happens, this can have catastrophic impacts on these assets, and in many cases it's being proven that this provokes a cycle of keeping people trapped in poverty. They cannot recover for these losses. The standard responses for these events are food aid or cash aid, normally are very costly or happen late, and in some cases they foster a dependency. So it's not the best potential solution. So there's where disaster risk financing and insurance comes in, as Ian was already mentioning the case of crops. So the key word here is early. So this has to have an early warning, have an early action as a consequence of that, and be backed by clear mechanisms of response. So again, I emphasize this is key here, is linking this warning with some action. So ILRI, which I haven't presented yet, ILRI is the International Livestock Research Institute. It's based in Nairobi, Kenya. That's where Francesco is based. So ILRI has been developing this index-based livestock insurance, or IBLI. The objective is to provide timely payouts to pastoralists to protect livestock in case of drought. And these payouts are given, when they happen, are given early in the growing season. Kenya has 2 growing seasons. So there are 2 cycles of monitoring and warning. So what is it? The conventional insurance, if you crash your car, or in the Western world, crop insurance for hail or frost or things like that. The typical case is that you have a loss, you put a claim to the insurance, there is a process of verification, and then you are paid a benefit. So this approach basically doesn't really work in the context of the East Africa pastoralist or agriculture world. So what happens here is that this is an index base, so there is a mechanism pre-agreed on an objective measurement of risk, and the payouts are given if this index falls below a certain threshold. There is no verification made, so the payouts are given to all the people that are pastoralists in each region when these warnings are triggered. So how does it work? It's a very simple approach. It's based on using MODIS time series NDVI. So these are aggregated to districts or counties. And then there is a growing season accumulation of NDVI, and that's compared to the long-term mean. And if this NDVI accumulation in each growing season falls behind the predetermined threshold, then these payouts are triggered. So again, it's very simple, based on areas that are mostly dryland, rangeland, and this is how the system works. So this is an example. There is a function that is triggered given a threshold, and the payouts are done in proportion to how much lower than average this index is. This is an example in, I think it's 2017. It's probably the same year as the drought in Uganda. and the colors represent the amount of payouts that were made in each one of these regions in northeast Kenya. So the system, I was in the wrong slide, not paying attention. So this is the function, this is the map of the payouts. There we are. The system started in 2010 with some pilot projects and then was scaled up in Kenya and Ethiopia. And since 2015, it was expanded to be part of a government program called CLIP, Kenyan Livestock Insurance Program. And since 2016, it has already made payouts in around 10 million US dollars. And there are plans to scale up to about 100,000 households. And there are feasibility analyses being made at the moment in Somalia, Uganda, Niger, and a few other countries interested as well. There. So some gaps and opportunities for the communities of Earth observation that I'm, again, telling on behalf of Francesco, insist. A few points that he's making. NDVI is great, everyone knows about it, is objective, but there is much more than can be done. So the main challenge here is better linking NDVI or similar indices to forage productivity. The second one is we need to improve the characterization of rangelands to better account for the heterogeneity and the differences in different vegetation systems, which in turn determine in many cases this NDVI to productivity or forage relationships. The big elephant in the room in all this is the forage quality. That's a big one that we haven't cracked very well with Earth observation, at least not with operational systems. That's a big need in the world of rangeland pasture monitoring. And the last one is the need for better in situ measurements of information to better calibrate, validate these models, especially in data-scarce regions like Africa. But this is a common thing even in Australia and in the Western world. And I haven't mentioned here, it's listed there as well, it's not all about Earth observation. Livestock densities are poorly quantified, so there is a need for better do that. Incorporate watering points is very important in the rangeland context where water is present and where the animals can go to get it. So this is the last slide, and it's a reflection of the program and the presentation. I insist here on behalf of, again, of Francesco, monitoring early warning is not really meaningful if it's not linked to action. And he points to many early warning systems that don't have this link mechanism. So the bottom-up approaches, the tools, and this is a good example, a tool has been designed and developed with very good understanding of the local demands, the needs, and the context. And again, the need for improving more data, improving on these methods, and making better use and better investments in on-ground data collection for calibration, validation, and improvement of these systems. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan. I wanted to let the audience know if you have any questions, please jot them down because we'll have our speakers come back up front to answer them. And next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Jane Kiyoko, who's from the Ministry of Agriculture, to share experiences about crop monitoring in Kenya. Jane.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Jane Kioko. I'm working for the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, State Department for Crop Development and Agricultural Research. My responsibility is to manage the food crop statistics. The mandate for my organization, among many of the mandates, is food and nutrition security. In relation to this presentation here, we are supposed to make sure that the country has enough food for the population. Some of the key functions, we have quite a number of them, but related to this, we have management of food security and nutrition, support for agricultural research and promote technology development where the EO data comes in. Then we have the agricultural risk management, climate change mitigation, agricultural insurance, surveillance and control of pests and diseases. Kenya is 80% arid and semi-arid, and we only have about 20% that is high and medium potential, so this function is very important for us. Then the issue of collecting and maintaining and the data and statistics. Data is a public good for us, so for the researchers and anybody who wants to develop programs in the agricultural sector, they refer to us for that kind of data. We have quite a number of development partners who are helping us to deliver on our mandate and our functions. You can see we have quite a number of them in this area. How are we applying Earth observation data? We have crop condition monitoring for food security, and that is where the crop monitor comes in. We started this process about a year and a half ago. From that, we are able to know at least every month the conditions of the crops in the fields and how that is going to impact on the expected production. Other than the satellite imagery that is helping us in knowing the crop condition, we also have field data that is collected by the units from the counties. We refer to them as counties. And they also give us information about the pests and diseases or any other hazard that is likely to affect the crops in the field. We also have the data about rainfall, whether the rainfall has been adequate within the month. Are we experiencing any drought, or do we have some floods in some of the areas, as these have got a great impact on the expected production. We are also looking forward to using EO to map the agricultural farms so that we can be able to know who is growing what, where, and what quantities, and how we can link them to other service providers. From 2017, we started using EO products to develop sampling frames for data collection to support the crop insurance program. That is a counterpart of what has just been presented here. And all that is meant, the crop monitor and the sampling frames are meant to support the crop insurance program. The crop monitor, we want to have evidence that the season, how the season progressed. We have 2 seasons. We want to have evidence such that as we are holding discussions with the insurance companies, we can have the reports to show that this is the way the season was. This is an example of how 2019 was. On my far left, you can see our season kind of started off badly. We had late onset of the rains, where you can see that Trans Nzoia. That was because of late onset. That was a drought for us, and that is one of the grain baskets for our country. But the rains changed because of the effects of climate change, and within 2 months, that's the same crop on the bottom side. So with those, that report from the crop monitor, we are able to report on the status of food security. Actually, that report assisted us to inform the top management that the situation is not as bleak as it seemed in the beginning of the season, but we are expecting good harvests within the grain basket. The second photo is on the effects of fall armyworm infestation in some of the areas in the country, and also frost. And with the crop monitor, at a glance, you are able to see where we are expecting problems and what kind of production we are expecting. So this is like, for us, the map is like a snapshot view of what is happening in our crop growing areas. So we have various products that we are using with the Earth observation data tools. We have a monthly food security report where we have rainfall data for the country and the region, because we are not self-sustaining as far as maize production is concerned, but we also want to know what is happening within the region where we import a lot of our maize. Then we have the monthly crop monitor bulletin, which is covers major crops per county. The major crops we are dealing with is mainly maize, wheat, and some pulses. Then from our sister institution called the National Drought Management Authority, which is mainly concentrated in the ASAL, arid and semi-arid parts of the country. We have early warning bulletins on issues of pasture condition, the prices of condition, and even livestock. Our collaborator, FuseNet, also gives us the food security outlooks, because they have a greater outlook. And then under the crop insurance program, we have been using the GPS satellite maps to sample farms where we do crop cutting experiments to determine the performance of the season, and to use that as a basis for compensation of the farmers who have been affected. We are using the area yield index insurance. This is an example of our crop insurance program. We have that sampling frame where we are making use of the ArcGIS to develop the sampling points. But we would wish to get better reference database data sets like in-season crop type maps, such that where we have the points where sampling will be done, we can see that the farmer that season planted maize and not another crop, and we don't waste resources visiting a farm where we are not likely to collect data. Those are some of photos showing the officers collecting the data in the field. How can we advance crop insurance using the Earth observation tools? Develop better sampling frames. We want also to be able to predict crop yields and reduce the cost of crop cutting, because it's quite expensive. And if we can know in advance, this is the yield we are expecting in a certain area, we can only concentrate in some areas where we are not sure about the likely yield. And from that, we are able to advise the insurance companies to prepare well in advance to compensate the farmers, such that they are able to prepare for the next season in time. We also want, in developing our sampling frames, to be able to define the homogeneous zones. Kenya is very diverse with the agroecological zones, and the methodology we are using right now is quite manual, but EO can come in and help us to do the work a little bit faster than we are doing it. We are also planning to move on to horticultural crops for some of farmers, where we intend to use the weather index insurance, and the EO data tools can assist us very much in this area. Another case is where we have developed a digital food balance sheet. At any given time, we need to be aware about how much do we have in the country so that we can prepare in time if we have problems. This is just a dashboard. We developed this like 2 months ago. It's a work in progress. And we want to leverage Earth observation too so that it has a predictive part of it where we want to have focus of the yields that feed into the supply part of the food balance sheet. And we feel the modeling and Earth observation tools can assist us here to know what kind of stocks are we expecting. We also want to map and collect data on the informal trade because it also contributes to the supply side of the balance sheet, and any hazard that is likely to bring losses that impact on the food status of the country at any given time. We have needs and current priorities as far as Earth observation tools are concerned. For crops data, we need more updated crop type maps. We want to be able to establish the area planted. This has been a challenge for us for some years because we are using mainly administrative data, but with EO tools, at least we can have better estimates of the area. For the yield, with area index, we are moving in the right direction, but our challenge is how to estimate the area currently. We also need soil type mass, crop stability with climate change. The farmers are changing from what we know as the traditional crops to more adaptive crops, so these suitability maps will be very suitable. Mapping of the farmers, we have not done a farmer census, but we are planning to do that very soon, such that we can know when we have government interventions, who is where and requires what kind of assistance. We are doing early warning for our farmers, but we want to enhance it using using the Earth EO tools, because sometimes you can tell the farmers the rain will be like this, and with climate change, the rain doesn't come when it's supposed to come, and that really changes the programs for the farmers. So we want to improve that, and all that is geared towards better statistics for planning and decision making based on the evidence that is reliable. We have capacity gaps. We are very young. I've said we just started using these tools about a year and a half ago. So we need techniques for crop yield forecasting, use of EO tools for crop area estimation, how we can use EO tools to reduce the cost of the crop insurance so that it is more attractive to the farmers. Data analytics training, data management tools. We have just started using the ArcGIS in our work, big data analytics, and most of all, we would like to have some exposure or exchange visits to other countries where they are advanced, and we learn from them, then we can be able to implement in our country. The current challenges we have in integrating, we know these tools are high cost, especially the high resolution satellite data sets. There are also rapid challenges in technologies. Many products are there, so we need guidance. We also have the inadequate skills on the application of the EO technologies, and we also don't have very strong policy and regulatory framework, which we can work on. We have some ongoing activities to address these challenges. We have the support from the GEOGLAM Kenya Crop Monitor, where we are getting satellite data, the crop monitor, and a lot of capacity building. We are also partnering with Godan, where they were able to support us with some licenses for ArcGIS. And the World Bank, we have a program that started about a year ago on Kenya Climate Smart project, and we have the government-funded crop insurance program. In conclusion, we are in the third industrial revolution that is defined by data and digitization, and Kenya, we are fairly good when it comes to ICT, and we want to improve to work with our partners to improve collection and management of our agricultural data. And the potential is huge, as we are seeing. There is a very huge potential for us to improve the decision-making in order to be able to manage our food security and improve the farmers' income. Lastly but not least, we are grateful to GEOGLAM community, University of Maryland for supporting us, the SAFIL program, and other partners who are helping us to move into this EOData field. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, for that wonderful presentation. You can see the linkages from the beginning and where we are right now. None of the presentations stands on its own. I'd like to welcome Anastasia Wahome from the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development to share about the regional agriculture monitoring activities in the broader region of Eastern Africa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to look at the regional agriculture and food security monitoring, and this Okay, looking at, I think more importantly, we are actually kind of building on the same initiatives that we are doing in the Eastern Africa region, and much of what Jane has also highlighted that is happening at the ministry. But at the regional level, I think one of the things I would want to ask is why monitor crops and at regional scale? And within the Eastern Africa region, we have within the IGAD region that covers, that's the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. We have 7 countries in that region that do a regional climate outlook every quarter. Now, these countries are already actively participating in that outlook, in that they produce data, they use Earth observation data within their countries, and they come together for a consensus on how the outlook will be for the next 3 months. And these climate assessments are disseminated quarterly at the Greater Horn of Africa Climate Outlook Forum. That's the GACOF. So that's an already established and ongoing initiative. And when you look at crop conditions, there are regular crop assessments within the countries by the agriculture ministries and the agencies. And a good example is what Jane has highlighted that happens in Kenya. And all those other 7 countries do similar activities within their countries. And these activities of assessments are mainly done with other agricultural stakeholders. Now, these conditions also include plant diseases and pest infestations, and previously these were like 2 very exclusive activities that were ongoing within the regions and within the individual countries. And with engagements with the ministry, the stakeholders within the region on agriculture, such as FUSNET, FAO, and with our research collaborators, Catherine, for example, from the UMD, we had discussions and realized that this gap between the climate outlook assessments, the agricultural assessments, But I realized that what UMD was doing under GEOGLAM is is an initiative that would bring together these two activities and have an output that would be useful for these countries. And looking at it is, there was this issue of the outlook, the quarterly climate outlooks that the countries so much believe in and actually use to make decisions and to plan for the next quarter. If they integrated with the crop assessments, and then they would be able to have an outlook also for the agricultural sector. And the way this was done was to develop the crop monitors based on experience that was already the crop monitors that were being developed in Uganda and Tanzania. Now, if you look at the normal process of crop monitoring, so you go to the field, look at what is happening, the status of the crops, if there are any diseases or pests. And then using that and Earth observation data, you are able to do better security assessments. We have FuseNet that works in the region and in many of the IGAD countries, as well as other individual institutions. RCMRD, we give our input into some of those assessments. And based on the outputs of those assessments, you will, the ministries which have the mandate to, for food security within the countries will either issue early warning or do better planning on what to do with the available food, like the cereals. They would plan maybe how do we offload if there is surplus. And looking at that chain, there are so many stakeholders that are involved, and bringing all of them together, what we have realized is one of the critical issues that enables success of these crop monitors, because it's not just developing them, but how do they help and how do they get to the right people so that they are able to make decisions. And under Savia, we hold stakeholder engagements on a regular basis, and we were able to identify the needs of the region, look at what data is available, what is being collected by the ministries, FuseNet, FAO, and the IGAD countries, what they have within their regular assessments, and also look at what skills we had within our project and our institutions, and also the resources. And from that, we also looked at what gaps do we have in order to be able to deliver or to address the challenge of bringing the climate outlooks and the crop assessments. And we partnered with ICPAC. ICPAC is a component, one of the climate component of the IGAD region, so it covers the 7 countries. And actually, ICPAC is the one that organizes the quarterly climate outlooks, the GACOF. So together we got capacity building from the University of Maryland, and on how to develop the crop monitors, bringing all the information together. And we did a co-development exercise for the IGAD region. And some of these, it's not as straightforward as it sounds. And with some of these engagements, how to get this regular data in time so that the bulletins are disseminated in time has necessitated the development of MOUs and agreements on data sharing. But I think the important thing is that we are able to have a regional monitor, crop monitor developed for all the 7 countries and disseminated in one of the GACOFs. And I think the success story of this engagement is that ICPAC, through the already established Climate Outlook Forum that happens quarterly, took over the dissemination of the national crop monitors as well in that forum, so that the stakeholders who usually come for the climate outlook are also able to look at what do this climate what does the outlook mean for the agricultural sector. And this is bringing more stakeholders into the climate outlook forums, because this is now an agricultural outlook for the same. And one of the other good thing is that the dissemination, because the outlook forum, not everyone within the agricultural sector is able to attend or maybe hear about what has been happening to produce the outlook. But the dissemination of the crop monitor, the regional crop monitor, has been very wide, and ICPAC has done a good job of looking at different media and platforms for dissemination, social media, documents that are shared via email lists, and sharing with partners and saying share widely and let everyone know. And what we have seen is that within the 7 countries, at the start of it, we only had Uganda and Tanzania doing national crop monitors. But after doing the regional crop monitor, one of the concerns was, the data is at a regional scale, and countries would want to see something more downscaled. Because if you show me the whole of Kenya, how do I know which particular regions in Kenya have got issues of the expected harvest? And that's how we now engaged with the Ministry of Agriculture and developed the National Crop Monitor for Kenya, which has been disseminated for more than half a year now. And we feel that the ministry now has capacity to continue with the development. And we have also had other countries coming on board and requesting for similar services. And we have Rwanda, which we have an ongoing engagement with them, and Ethiopia, where we are just starting the initiatives. And one of the, some of the outcomes, other than having the regional crop monitor, is that the capacity, or rather the interest that has been generated by this initiative has kind of opened the space for the stakeholders, such as the ministries, who are not very keen on using Earth observation data. And like Jane has highlighted, I think the Kenyan PS, Principal Secretary of Agriculture, is actually demanding on a very regular basis on some of these reports that we are generating, because they give evidence that is visible and that can help in planning. And so the capacity has been improved, and now we have better security assessments for the countries and for the region as a whole, and also other players who have come on board. With the crop monitors, when you are able to see that in certain areas, for example, the Western Kenya showing in green, we are going to have a good harvest, there are other players who need to plan. For example, the East African Grain Council has come on board because they regulate the markets. They deal with the selling of the grains and buying when there is shortage, and that gives them ample time to be able to plan on whether to actually back up a shortage or maybe offload a surplus. And also other key players like the WFP, which also deals with distribution in areas that are facing drought. So with all that information, we have seen a lot of positive engagements. The East African Grain Council, for example, is also kind of just starting to get more involved and get within the stakeholders of agriculture, use more Earth observation products and tools to be able to monitor how the grains are moving within the countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. That was a really good presentation. I think some of the key things across the presentations we've heard so far, we've heard about core development, demand-driven, let the product, the demand drive, the core development. Juan talked about this. We talked about understanding your stakeholder, your end user, and I think some of the sort of the key messages coming out is that as we're working with our end users, we have to understand the dynamic and really what they're trying to achieve. So I have a presentation. I'm just going to go really, really quickly through it because I'd like to save some time so that we can hear from David as well to share about the NAPs. Mine is just from the experiences working in Eastern Africa, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Uganda, in Rwanda, and at the region in general. There's certain things that are sort of cross-cutting that sort of I'm trying to put all of these into some kind of framework that can be adapted for other countries. As Anastasia was saying that once something works really, really well and can easily be adapted, that's basically where this framework is coming from. And just that, this has already been spoken about by Ian, the value of EO. One of the key things is that it provides timely, objective, and repeatable data. For the Ministry of Agriculture in Kenya, this makes a very big difference because the methods that have been used in the past require a lot of field assessments, a lot of resources, a lot of planning. So with that kind of background, you're probably able to do an assessment once every 6 months. And so the EO data change this extremely. The other thing is that EO data provide us global coverage, but with very local details. We're looking at 3 different areas that look completely different. It's the same data, but you can sort of look at these 3 different landscapes, derive other products that can help you better understand what's actually happening on the ground there. We have a long, dense time record. A key thing in when you're trying to understand what the impact of a certain event is, like what Juan presented on the index insurance, you have to have some historical data. With EO, a record like the Modus record, we're able to look 20 years now backwards and then understand what the current condition means. The methods that are being developed, that are being advanced through the EO community, the GEO community, enable us to understand completely different landscapes. Using the same data, you can understand completely diverse landscapes. The other thing is low cost, because some of this has been covered by space agencies, NASA, ESA, providing us critical data sets to fill these huge gaps, but there's also potential for integration with field data, working with communities, working with citizen science that can fill these other gaps that are not possible. And so still, as Jane was saying, there's still a huge gap, and there's a lot of need to help advance this using these methods and the data. There's strong interest, as you've heard, and there's a lot of proliferation in the private sector that is helping bridge very serious gaps. And there's still some challenges, and we can talk about these a little bit later on. This framework that I'm just going to go through real quickly is that it's sort of an opportunity to improve timeliness and reliability of information on agriculture using existing remote sensing systems that are application ready, that are operational ready, that can be used quickly and be adapted within any Ministry of Agriculture. And one thing that Ian mentioned this morning was that something that's repeatable and understood and accepted by the user community is key for pushing this integration. It's a very, very big framework, but they're like big components that sort of make it digestible. So we have the satellite data component, we have a field data component, and then we have sort of a national level, you can call it sort of a national coordination center where all of these information come together for reporting, similar to what Jane was talking about. And just to sort of break it down a little bit, we have the farmer, and at the farmer level, we have to figure out a way of getting information to the farmer in a way that is digestible by the farmer. The second thing is that the farmer directly interacts with extension agents who often are also farmers themselves. So the extension agent at this point is a resource, someone who can collect data, but then somebody who can relay the information. So there's potential to work with extension agents for the field data collection. As well as the private sector, there are a lot of initiatives and programs and private sector companies that are collecting information for them providing services like seeds, and these also very critical partners that can be a huge contributor to a broader national program. The second part is the field data component. We've heard a lot about validation. Juan mentioned this. Jane also talked about this. We need ground data in order to be able to understand the yield. We can use EO to direct us where to collect that ground data. We can use ground data to train, to validate, to check accuracy. You can work with the extension agents to collect this data. It has to be done in a reasonable, at a reasonable frequency, continuously. It can be a linkage with weather stations that also, help provide other variables that are required for agriculture monitoring. And for most of the countries in Eastern Africa, there's a huge human resource with the extension agents, but there's very little resource and very little training, and you need very little actually to harness the human resource to get a national program on agriculture monitoring going. The interesting one for GEOGLAM and the EU community in general is that we need to ensure that when we're bringing these tools and data, that they're in a state where they can be dependable and reliable. So it has to be an operational system, one that's not going to go away tomorrow, one that's guaranteed to continue providing that data that's required. There needs to be a lot of automation. An example is the Centro Agri system, where you do not expect a lot of investment in IT at local ministries. We need to be able to provide some kind of in-season crop type, crop area, some sort of forecasting, and then linking this information with other systems that provide and aggregate weather and climate information that is integrated into a global or regional system where countries can go in and look at details for their countries at any administrative level is important. And then, of course, working with partners. Partnerships are key. Countries can't do everything on their own, and there are agencies that can provide a lot of backstopping and human resources as well. And then all of that sort of comes together at this we can call it a national coordination center, where we have analysts, for example, Jane and her team are able to access the field data. It's through a simple system that they can directly reach and get this data. They can visualize and look at data coming from the global archiving systems. They have a remote sensing expert. This is a critical person to have within this ministry, so there's potential there for education and training. And then we have, of course, the field data, which should feed into sort of a visualization portal, then the countries can use it for their own reporting. So it's a sort of a plug and play. And some of the key qualities of the system, some of the ones that we've been advocating for and using a lot, is that it has to have a clear use case. There's a definite demand from the end user, and this is what they want to apply it to. Does that system work for it, or it doesn't? It has to be operational ready. It has to have global with local details, because I think developing multiple small national level archiving systems doesn't make any sense. But if you have this one system where you can go in and pull out the data for your region, it's more than sufficient. Free access or affordable, very, very important for integration and use. It has to have a sort of a steep learning curve if you wanted to work at, with people who've been working in the ministry 5-10 years. They're not remote sensing experts, but they're people who can learn really quickly to use those data sets. And it has to be this process of working with the end user to understand what they want to do, and then you can start talking about what the tool you have is, and that tool has to be adaptable to whether it's administrative levels of reporting or adding existing data that the ministries have. And I was just going to show some examples of some of the tools that sort of kind of can fill some of the gaps. We have a GLAM data portal, which is a really good resource. It's a global system. You can access data from some of the data that Juan presented that is being used in the livestock insurance program is data that you can access on this MODIS system. Agri-Food in Canada uses this data, the MODIS data, for making crop assessments. This one is from yesterday, I think. And it's very easy to work with. The Kenya Ministry uses it, Ethiopia uses it, IGAD uses it, and it's a very good system to sort of use. We have an early warning explorer where you can access rainfall and temperature data. This is one of the, I think I call it like a game changer, because ministries of agriculture, they're a struggle to get information on rainfall and forecasts. And this changes that because, and not because they don't have mate agencies, but mate agencies operate in a different way where the data is not available to the ministries in time for them to make their assessments. This is something that can sort of fill that gap. And another one is just Open Data Kit. I use this a lot for some of the work that I'm doing. We are able to create very quick forms for validation that can be used by anybody, anywhere. It's customizable, it's free access, it's open source. You can create forms in any language, and that means it's very easy to be applied anywhere. Some just what the data looks like. And we have the GEOGLAM crop monitors. These sort of provide a standard method and way of making assessments, and they're used at the global level for the crop monitor for AMIS and the crop monitor for early warning. But it's been easy to adapt these to the regional level, with the national level crop monitors. We also have a crop monitor for Rwanda and a crop monitor for Mali that's already in development. But it's that they're customized for that particular country's interest. And this is some of the things, some of the bulletins where they're integrating field data, GLAM data. We have data coming from, I think this is also rainfall and temperature. And we have this data from the Ministry of Agriculture where they're able to incorporate existing reports and existing data sets that they're collecting on their own. This is more details for the one for Tanzania. This is the one for Uganda. This is the same GLAM system. This one is at NASA. We have an example for Kenya, integration with field data. You'd be surprised where you can get your field data from. WhatsApp is a very good way of validating and reporting about what's happening. Some of the pictures that Jane showed are pictures that, I think one on the corner with the lady that where her field started poorly and then recovered was literally just sent via WhatsApp, and that's a really good indication. You can ask more people to validate if this is the case for every individual farmer in the area. This is the one for Rwanda that's currently under development, and it's the same tools, the same systems, but adapted and usable at the national level for those particular countries. This is the Eastern African one that Anastasia talked about, where the integration of the crop monitor enhanced the use of the GACOF, the Greater Horn of Africa Climate Outlook Forum forecasts for agriculture monitoring, and also the market information coming from the Eastern Africa Grain Council. So you have 1, 2, 3 communities that have been working separately, working together to produce a report that's useful for the region, and countries run with this report and use it for their own decision making. And this is what I meant about WhatsApp. So you can get very, very good data about where pests have occurred. You can ask, has anybody, can we confirm reports of fall armyworm in your area? And you'd get 20 messages saying, giving you each region where A, B, C, D has happened, and that is really important. And then you can use it for anything, including livestock monitoring. You can get pictures to figure out what disease is affecting livestock. I think that's it. That's my presentation. I'd like to invite David from the UNFCCC, yes, to share about the National Adaptation Plan. The idea is that countries are developing these plans, which are critical, as Jane mentioned, with the changing climate. We have to become smarter about what you're doing, and countries are developing these. And there's an opportunity for our two, if you want to call them communities, to sort of work together and enhance what's being done.
Thanks a lot. I think Catherine has just given my presentation in 1 minute. Just a show of hands, like who knows what a national adaptation plan is or has heard of it? Okay, good. I'll give you a little bit of background. It's basically a tool to reduce vulnerability to the impact of climate change by building adaptive capacity and resilience, and to facilitate the integration of climate change adaptation in a coherent manner. That means it is also a process, like it's not the plan only, it's a process of implementation, formulating and implementation actually, a national adaptation plan. And this is also enshrined in the global goal of adaptation, that is in Article 7 of the Paris Agreement. Sorry, I need to also press this button here. There. Exactly. So the NAPs are actually helping towards working to this global goal of adaptation. In order to formulate, so the national adaptation plans were initially aimed mostly at the least developed countries, but now also like being done by the developing countries. There were some sets of initial guidelines. Now we have technical guidelines which are very detailed in a stepwise approach on how to formulate and implement a national adaptation plan. And then there are supplements which are also very important. So supplements are actually specific guidelines for specific sectors such as ecosystems, health. So this kind of sectoral approaches are being integrated into the whole approach. So that there is a comprehensive that the NAP is a comprehensive tool, and also to integrate all the knowledge of our stakeholders into the process. I'm not going to present all of this to you, but basically the NAP has 4 big elements. It's laying the groundwork is mainly to see what gaps and needs are, starting the process, building the committees along ministries, the stock taking, also now the GCF, applying for the GCF fund readiness program, then going towards a preparatory element in which scenarios are being built and assessed, and the implementation strategy. So it's very important to say that the National Adaptation Plan, it sounds like another document that's being produced, but it's actually, the document is just, it's a process. The document is just basically manifestation of the implementation. And then the reporting, monitoring, and review, and I think I don't need to tell that to you, but it's important that you always iterate, and see what has been successful, what hasn't been successful, how can we improve. The vision for this whole process is to have a well-structured adaptation process, which is very important because adaptation touches actually, when we talk about climate change, adaptation on mitigation, which is much less quantifiable than mitigation. It touches so many sectors, so many ministries and countries, that it's very important to have a well-structured adaptation process to basically minimize overlaps, and to have a very efficient process. To have each LDC now to have a NAP by 2020, and to have implementation of priority adaptation needs, and to have a demonstrable result in addressing the climate risks. This is a little, This is a small graphic of where it stands, where the process is at the moment. You can see that many countries have started the process and in the stage of laying the groundwork and addressing gaps, and that we are still in the beginning, but already undertaking this process. Another point that's very important to understand is that there is a connection. I mean, probably more of you have heard of NDCs, the National Determined Contribution, than of the NAPs. That's actually the NDCs and NAPs have a mutual relationship. So we have 180 parties now that have submitted NDCs, and there's also an adaptation component of NDCs. And then we have 34 parties that make an explicit reference to the process to formulate and implement NAPs. So there can be a component inside the NDCs, but most parties have their own standing national adaptation plans, especially developing countries. When we look at the developing countries, so the blue, I also want to point with this nice green pointer here. So the blue countries have national adaptation plans implemented. I think we're at the moment at 13 national adaptation plans that have been submitted. And the last one I think was Ethiopia in March. And the light blue ones are in preparation. For the grayish developing countries, there's no information available at this moment. And now to the most important part for this purpose, where are potential entry points for Earth observation in NAPs. So we can say, that agriculture and food security are central to all NAPs. So what EO can do, and I think that has been very nicely said by all the previous speakers, is it can provide the baselines, assess the impacts, vulnerability, and risks. I think that's a very important complementary information to the field work that's actually being undertaken. Another very important part is the water assessment, land resources and ecosystems monitoring, and then the early warning, which is normally, which can be seen as more like a disaster or early warning systems. But they're also important in terms of integrating it into the wider development planning. But I think that has been said today as well. So on the ways to engage is basically through the Open NAPs. That's a program where stakeholders can actually provide guidance for countries into the national adaptation plans. And so the aim is there to mobilize experts and program to really work with countries to support them in order to help them to base their national adaptation plan on the best information available. And also I think we have the annual national adaptation plan expos, the NAP expos, always one global one and regional ones that are then more targeted to the specific regions. That's always a great place to actually meet countries who need support, but also with a lot of providers of information. If you want to have further information on the National Adaptation Plan process, you can either approach me here. I'm here throughout the whole week, but you can also write a message to Paul, who's the Grand Seigneur of NAPs, and he will be able to guide you to the right places. And I think that's it for me, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from the colleagues on the panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, David. We're going to move into a panel part of our session. I'd like to invite our speakers, including you, David. I have a burning question for you. Fantastic. So the way we thought about this session initially, I have some questions that have come up while everybody was presenting, and I took note of these, and I'd like to ask each panelist at least one question, and then we'll ask the audience to ask a few questions. And my first one is actually for you, David. You said some of the countries some of the countries are initiating the process and others are a little bit further ahead. And there's a huge potential for EO to provide some of the baseline information needed for this implementation, and then maybe for when they're implementing their adaptation plans, they have to develop like specific project activities. My question to you is, you've heard a little bit about GEOGLAM and what GEOGLAM is doing. What do you think? What do you think is one? What do you think is the first next step that we can that the community GEOGLAM can do to be more engaged or to support some of the the development? I've seen some of the supplementary information, and some of it is really old and could be brought up to date with more details on EO. I was curious as to whether you've thought about how GEO and GEOGLAM specifically can directly support that process.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think one of the great examples here was that the whole how the information was collected, bundled, and displayed. I think that's a very important part, because I think what we have seen today also is it's not only that you collect data and you make it accessible somewhere, but you somehow need to make it understandable. You need to make it comprehensible for people who might not have a degree in some kind of agriculture, or earth observation, who are not geographers. So I think the important part here is providing actually data and information that is understandable for the countries, and then of course get in contact with the countries. So I mean, we do have a list of countries who have initiated the NAP and could help, or could need the support. You have actually talked about the supplementary guidelines. It's like, how can we condense the info? How could you condense your information into something that is a guideline, or can help countries how to use data like yours? And then of course get in touch with the community. I think that's something that you have done to be at the NAP workshop, because when you talk to the people, you understand better what their needs actually are. And then I think it's also very important to connect to the great field work. I think you have a lot of people in the countries, and sometimes you know how it is. The connections are not being made within ministries, or like one ministry is responsible for the NAP, another one is working together with you. So you have great resources at hand. So people who do excellent work in the field and who can actually support the NAP process. And I think you have a lot of resources to support this whole process.
Thank you so much, David. That's an excellent response, and you've shared some really keen ideas. And on the last point that you just made, one thing you notice in East Africa, there are the ministries operate in silo. It's getting better. Met agencies don't work directly with ministries of agriculture, but I know that for the national adaptation plans, they're typically housed in the Ministry of Environment, who is, there's very little cross-integration with the ministries of agriculture, and that is something that I think has to be addressed. And this brings me to my question to Ian, which sort of ties into what you just responded on, and it is, what are some new efforts towards capacity development in the GEOGLAM community that countries can tap into already, and also thinking about what David just said, what are some ways that we can better link the two communities?
Okay, so generally GEOGLAM is an initiative of initiatives. So we have many initiatives. You've seen a lot of them today. We have over 100 institutions feeding into GEOGLAM, so it's very large, but what we do is as an initiative is coordinate all those activities and try to bring greater value, understanding that the whole can be greater than the sum of the individual parts. And in terms of capacity development, we're just moving forward on that now, knowing that we have multiple groups within GEOGLAM already working in places like Africa and other parts of the world on co-development and capacity development. If we can better coordinate that, first understand what's going on in different parts of the world, and then bring the best practices forward. We're developing a set of principles for capacity development as well. I think that's one way we can do better coordination at the center to help make the most out of all these activities that are going on. And I see the NAP as another opportunity to reach out broader, to coordinate with things that are already going on, make the NAP better by our contribution, but at the same time, the NAP can help make us better and our outreach better and more integrated with the work they're already doing. So really, it's a coordination activity that I think we can really move forward on.
Perfect, thanks, Ian. I have one question which ties into coordination, and this one goes to Juan. And my question is, what is the benefit and added value of coordination with local stakeholders in the livestock insurance program? Because you, from what you showed, is linking with, the pastoralists is not that straightforward, and figuring out where they are, what the livestock is, where the watering points are. I was curious as to whether they, what are some of the benefits of coordinating with these with local stakeholders, including the NDMA, the National Drought Management Authority, for example, in Kenya.
Yeah, and I again insist on my disclaimer. I'm responding on behalf of Francesco, who is the one with the boots in the ground. But I think the main benefit is something I already said in the presentation, is to have a clear understanding of what the needs are, what the problems are, and understanding the local context. So in that sense, the program has been designed with the end user in mind, and it has been learning along the way. It hasn't been a cycle of research and feedback, but rather these two things have been happening in parallel. So again, that's because the stakeholders were engaged all along the process.
And just to follow on that one, I know you're leading the activities under GeoRap, and I was curious as to what are some limitations and current challenges in the work that you're doing in the rangeland program?
If the question comes about the technology, and this is something we tend to all agree, regardless of where in the world we are working on, the need to get better at estimating the biophysical properties of interest, how much feed there is there for the animals to feed on. NDVI is great, it's useful, but in many cases doesn't tell you exactly how much of the good stuff you have there. And that links to the second issue that comes every time we sit together and talk about it in rangeland monitoring, which is the quality of the pasture or the rangeland, which is what the species are the grasses you really want, and what the nutritional status of those grasses. So this is more technical aspects. In many cases, access to technology and know-how, it's an issue in many places. Not so much, I would say, in the case of IBLI, and I would say probably not so much in my own experience doing rangeland monitoring in Australia for different purposes, but many times our partners in RAP come up with the notion that accessing, knowing what data are there, how to access, it's a common issue that comes all the time.
Yeah, it's true also in the crop monitoring as well. And my next question is for you, Jane. And it is, you mentioned the capacity gaps within your ministry. And I know that there are many activities, have been many activities over the years to enhance and develop capacity towards using, GIS remote sensing within the ministry. And I was wondering if, what is one way you think we can ensure some kind of, we can ensure capacity is maintained and continues to grow. So how do we approach sustained, continuous capacity where there, no big gaps and it's, not dependent on a project or an activity, but something that is continuous, and we can evaluate that 10 years from now the ministry was here for this particular activity and this is where they are, and there's been benefit from all the different efforts coming into the ministry.
The best way to go about that is, first of all, because this is a new field, is to build capacity at the national level. We have a pool of experts, and this is downscaled to at the subnational level, where we do what we call the training of trainers, so that we have a better outreach in the ground. The other way is to still maintain the partnerships with the university, RCMRD, to ensure that at the national level we are constantly updated, because the issue of technology is very dynamic, and we need to keep pace with the development so that we are able to manage food security, because the rest of the country depends on us.
And just to follow on, not directly a follow on to that one, but another question for you, which is, how has EO influenced programs and policy implementation within your country?
When we look at the crop insurance program, where we have used the EO tools more, we have moved from, we started with list frame, where we did enumeration of farmers in the pilot counties that we started. That was a very expensive exercise that also there could have been errors in the data entry and so forth. But with the EO tools now, we have it's cheaper comparatively, and when it comes to planning, you can do that work in a shorter period. Comparatively, you can also be able to map even where the data has been collected for further use, when we want to monitor certain farms over a longer period of time, because the farms are geo-referenced. So this is a better way than what we have been doing in the past, using the list frame, which is it was really very expensive for us.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned in your slides, you said there's a weak policy, and I don't know, do you know if there are any plans for like the Kenyan government to sort of, maybe as an example for the insurance program, where there's going to be a bigger push towards using, satellite data for, this yield assessments, or for generating national statistics. I don't know if there's any ongoing discussions within the policy framework for Kenya. Do you know?
Yeah. Those plans are there because the need has been felt, and we have seen where we have the gaps. Generally in data management and statistics, we know we are not yet there, but we are in that process of developing the legal framework.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jane. I have a question for Anastasia, and you work at the regional center where you do a lot of training and capacity development, and you're in a really great position to sort of see and document some of the best practices. And I was curious as to whether you have any, one, two off the top of your head, best practices for core development of tools and data sets for agriculture monitoring.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. I think from experience and being able to implement other services other than agriculture. One of the key points that we always emphasize is when you want to do co-development, first of all, is what exactly is it that's being developed. So being able to engage with the users, find out what it is that they have, what capacities do they already have, what skills do they already have and knowledge, and then see what is it that we have from our end, and being able to analyze those gaps so that when we do co-development, sometimes we are capitalizing on existing skills, on existing capacities, and we only want to bring on board what is missing. And sometimes there's the component of whatever that the solution entails, the capacity does not exist. So, meaning that we are going to sit together with the users. For example, in the case of the crop monitor, the officials at the ministry, and actually go through the development of the crop monitor together from the beginning. They know how to collect field data best. We haven't done that, but we had the skills in developing or processing the Earth observation data. So by sitting together and training them on how to process the Earth observation data, and then bringing the field data and the Earth observation data together as a team has actually enabled them to learn faster and be able to be more independent faster. And I think we've also learned several things about how the data collection in the field happens, and that way we are able to develop the processes for integration in a more comprehensive way.
Mm-hmm. So from the example you showed for the regional one, it's coming from some examples from countries that are already using the tools, and then newer countries coming on board and wanting to use the tool. So this is the case where there's more demand than, I guess you could say, supply. My question to you is, what do you think is the biggest thing right now that could be addressed in order to address that demand, but then also reach more countries that are really, really interested? Because I think right now you're probably being bombarded by other countries. They want to develop their own monitoring systems. They want to run their own programs. And what do you think, what is that one thing?
Yeah, I think one of the things that there are several ways of going about it, and one of the ones we have capitalized on is, for example, using the GACOVs that happen quarterly. We are able to bring the interested countries together, like have side sessions where we discuss what has happened, and that way they are able to learn from those who are already developing the crop monitors. And the methodologies are well established already, so they are able to look at what it is within their countries, the resources or skills or the institutions that would form a team, the best team that would be able to develop the crop monitors. We've also had, or rather assisted to hold an exchange, a learning exchange with stakeholders from countries that have operationalized and those that have an interest in developing their own. And that exchange was actually very successful because, for example, Rwanda was able to even be able to identify better the stakeholders that they felt would give an input into the development of their crop monitor. And Ethiopia also to plan for the start of the initiative.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. As a follow-on to that one, my next question is for you, Ian. What is the best way countries can directly engage with the GEOGLAM community? So, for example, Jane working in her ministry or another ministry in, I don't know, Botswana, they're interested in tapping into these existing tools. What is the most direct way that they can reach out to the community? And is there a platform where they can sort of share their needs and sort of for those to be brought to the broader GEOGLAM community. For example, can I send a request from my country and say I want to do A, B, C, D? And is there a way for a process for that, you know, to be addressed, I guess?
Well, first of all, I'd say the most important interaction is with people like yourself and the other initiatives actually on the ground, working in the region to work through them. But in terms of the role of the GEOGLAM Secretariat, certainly we're a very open community. You can access us through our website, contact us anytime, and I'm a good contact person anyways because I kind of have I have a good understanding of the entire landscape, and I can usually point people to the best place to get the kind of support they want. And then there's a number of aspects that they can engage in, like we have a research network of over 40 sites around the world. Some in Africa, but we need more, particularly in smallholder situations. So there's opportunity to engage in the research side. There's opportunities on the operational side through the crop monitor and the work that you're doing with harvest, and also China Crop Watch is doing work in Africa. There's currently an exercise with called Send for Stats, working with statistical agencies in Africa, largely supported by ISA, but to develop EO products that support national agricultural statistics. So there's many ways. Certainly the website and my contact is one to start with to reach those, but certainly the best way for us to reach out to them, I think, is to have people in the region actually working. And I think the great work that we've seen you and others do in these countries that are adopting the approaches provides an example for other nations, and I think that's why we see the desire and the need for our support outstripping our ability and our capacity currently to deliver it. And that's a good thing, I think. That's why I'm keen on this discussion to understand how we can start to scale up some of these activities. And you think of something like 50 by 2030, a lot of numbers in there, where they're focused on agricultural statistics, building them up in 50 countries by 2030. I think eventually we could see an initiative like that paralleling it, but focused on Earth observation support for that kind of work. That would be a great way to reach out as well and build on the engagement that's already happening in a lot of the countries through the statistical agencies, reach out to more statistical agencies that have the responsibility for a lot of the SDGs and so on. So there's, I guess, not one way, but many ways I'm suggesting to interact.
Thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes. I have more questions, but I was wondering if there's a burning question in the audience for any of our speakers.
How are we using satellite data to look into eroding soils? And what are these national plans do? How much time, how much effort have they put it into the stopping of topsoil loss for food security?
Anybody?
I can try and answer. This is not talking about Africa, but in Australia, we are working with the government, the Department of Agriculture, and the focus on rangeland monitoring in this particular project is on the driest part of the Australian continent, and with the big interest on monitoring ground cover, so how much vegetation is there, to understand how much the soil is protected from wind and soil erosion, and then better understanding how to improve the ground cover target setting in the grazing areas. Main focus is grazing, but it also goes into the agriculture in the cropland region. So this particular example is mainly focused not so much on food, but on soil conservation. So that's one specific case that I can bring up.
In terms of the question about how this is reflected in national adaptation plans, I think that is mostly a question of whether it's a climate impact. So, for example, if there's more erratic rainfall and that leads to more soil erosion, that will definitely be captured because it's basically vulnerability and affects the agriculture in that region. And then it's one of the factors that will be taken into account and by the data identified. And then there are plans developed in order to address this problem.
There's
Can I add something?
sure.
Just a very quick statement. So land degradation in general is an integrated challenge. Our community takes care of a piece of it, and some of the work on essential agricultural variables is kind of focused on identifying what we can contribute to that discussion. But really, ultimately, we need better integration between multiple communities. Essential variables is one way. But if we want to look at the SDGs, for instance, land degradation neutrality, that's an important one. It really, we haven't, as a broader community, matured to the point where we have the integration across communities to be able to bring the pieces that we can each bring in a way that can be coordinated and brought together. So there's a big challenge there, and I think that goes throughout all the science communities as well. It's a work in progress, let's say.
We have another question right here in the middle.
I think it was Jane that mentioned about training in analytics. I was wondering if you could expand a bit more on what exactly was the training need that you felt the communities and various people needed.
Thank you. When we talk about capacity building, I said we are pretty new in the use of the EO data tools. And for instance, just use of the GIS to develop the sampling frame. That we would like to have further training on how we can use this for various uses, not just for the sampling. We know we can also have some other tools to predict yields and such kind of training. We are very young in this field.
Maybe I can add that most of the ministries, we have what you call like mid-level professionals. So they've been working in the ministry 5-10 years, and a lot of them don't have a degree in remote sensing or GIS, and we're bringing all of these tools and all these data sets, a different way to visualize. We're not working with just simply tables and basic averages, but we're looking at all of that information. Especially, I think it becomes really important to have sometimes very targeted trainings for achieving a certain objective that fits into a broader ministry objective. So those skills can be applied for many, many different things. Just simply being able to access rainfall and temperature information and then using it for something else, while you're also using it for the ministry to report on potential effects in productivity. So it's consideration that we're almost always dealing with the ministries of agriculture. We're dealing with like mid-level agriculturalists, if you want to call them that, because they have masters in agriculture or in crop science, but not in remote sensing. And so we have to sort of bridge that gap. And once you understand, I think, that background, you start to work backwards and go through all of these things. So sometimes it takes a really, really, really long time to get to the end objective. But when you get there and then rework through it again and again, it becomes like, this is my skill, I like doing this, and I want to keep doing it in that sense. So then you end up having, we call them champions. In each country you have people who are really keen on it, who can help other people move along at the pace that for your specific training, for example. We have time for like one more question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Ruud Grim from the Netherlands Space Office. I would like to address at least one question to IBLI. I would like to know let's say, how affordable the services that you are providing for the smallholder pastoralists to them, and can you maintain the services in the long term? And for the other panelists, maybe to reflect on how you can, let's say, scale up all the data that you're gathering at the ministry and institute, how you can make that useful to inform farmers.
So I can go so far. The IBLI system started as a series of small pilot projects working with the private sector, and then it was picked up and adopted by the Kenyan government as a way of welfare maintenance. In the long term, I'm not so sure. I suppose that being a government program has a better prospects of maintenance, and some international donors, I think, are involved as well. For more details, I would really point you to the people in Nairobi running the program. I'm not in the best place to give a full answer, but generally speaking, that's the way it's going.
I can add a little bit. This is not about IBLI, but about the crop insurance, and Jane and Anastasia can add. When the crop insurance one started, maybe 3 years ago, the coverage was about 35,000 farmers, and there were some struggles with data and doing analysis and getting insurance, because it's like a pool of insurance companies paying out farmers. So it's not like one insurance company with a direct contract with each farmer. And fast forward to 2019, this year, for last year's season, they paid out, I don't remember the exact, 12,000 farmers were paid, but the coverage has gone up to about 350,000 farmers for that program. And the government announced, I think it might have been in May, that they are dedicating, I think, something like 3 billion Kenya shillings to this, to continue the program, because they see the value in it. So, the government standing behind it and saying that we're gonna keep doing this, and also expanding coverage is an indication that there's potential for continuing it. And it's now, a huge burden on the Ministry of Agriculture, who has to assess yield for now. Coverage of 300,000 farmers means more counties. I think they started with maybe 1 or 2, and now there are 20 counties. So, just understanding those kinds of things are ongoing is another way to support the ministries directly, because it's a direct need of how do we do this, how do we continue to scale this up. If the government provides another 10 billion next year, how do we cover more farmers, but in a way that insurance companies will be willing to pay for them? And that's a really positive thing, I guess, in that sense. Yes.
I would just like to add on the question, and I think direct that to the panelists. I mean, the second question that the gentleman just asked about how to make the information useful. I mean, I've seen a lot of super valuable information today generated in the field and by you, and you said you have this very customizable system that can be used. Normally, customizable also means that you need some training in order to be able to use it properly. And on the other hand, I see private sector companies with proprietary solutions using the open data that's generated and selling their products to countries who don't have the capacity to interpret the data. How can all this data that's generated for free, not for free, but in government programs be made better accessible? And I think that's also from the field, like what are the needs in terms of this, and how can one counter these kind of proprietary services that are now coming, I think, our way more and more.
I just wanted to add on the issue of sustainability of the insurance. And I think there are some challenges that have already been realized, for example, with the forecasts. And we've, at RCMRD, we are trying to do more research in the use of index-based insurance, and currently partnering with the University of California, Davis, to do what you're calling the quality index insurance-based certification. And this entails generating and testing Earth observation products that have better predictions for yields, and together with the insurance agencies and the government. And there's quite a business model that the insurance companies have been interested actually for several years. But the challenge for the insurance companies has been, the accuracy of the predicted data, because they would want to be able to somehow standardize on the premiums that the farmers pay. But with these engagements and the developments that are ongoing, they're still on board, and there's still a lot of prospects for better results, where not just the insurance companies that will feel more comfortable with the data that's being generated from Earth observation products, but also the farmers, that they're well protected and actually get compensated at the right time.
Maybe just a quick response to David's, because I think we're almost out of time, and then maybe others can add. For packaging information for the farmer, like how do you really use this information? How would I use that information if I was a farmer? I strongly believe that right now, at the level at which we're working, we have huge potential to influence decisions that in the end affect farmers and communities that are affected when, for example, there's a drought. And getting the ministries of agriculture to be able to use data to inform the decisions that are trackable, traceable, we can reproduce, you can check, validate, I think is a huge step from where we were like 5 years ago, for example, in Uganda. I work with farmers when I'm in the field, extension agents, we collect data. They tell me a lot more about what's actually happening than I know. And so I haven't sort of figured out a way of really completing the loop where you can send this critical information to the farmer. There's, of course, work that's going on with like text messaging and delivering radio information, and that is like really, really important. But for the level where I think we have the most significant impact is, informing government decisions for the insurance program. This, all of Western Kenya is undergoing so you have to plan for, scale up the livestock insurance program. There's likely to be, more conflict because more people, don't have food. There'll be migration and all those things. And so I don't know what others think on the panel, but I'm not there where I think we were able to reach a broader farmer community. The farmer communities, they're so different. There's so many localized events and things that are almost impossible to really quantify and provide. Downscaling doesn't, get anywhere close to what the farmers need, really. I don't know what others think. No? Yes.
I just want to add to what you were saying, that the Netherlands government is funding a program called GEOGLAM for agriculture and water, and we are supporting 25 initiatives in 15 countries doing what you exactly been explaining what we can do. So if anyone is interested to learn about that, come to me and I will give you some insights about this program.
Fantastic. Welcome.
We've just embraced the G4AW, and the Netherlands Space Office representative is now part of our executive committee, or attended a couple of weeks ago. So this is how the communities grow, right? We see commonalities in things we're doing, and we try to coordinate, connect, and build on them.
All right, we're definitely out of time. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to our session. I hope it was informative, and please feel free to ask any of the speakers any more questions that you might have. I thank Ian for the vision for arranging this session. I think it was a really, really positive and really good one. And Juan, you shouldn't be too, too strict and too strong on yourself, because I think you did a really good job representing FAVA, and I thank everybody for taking the time today. Thank you very much. And a big round of applause for the